Alright, well, I'm going to show you what kind of outlets come in light switches come in mobile homes. And as you can already tell, no box, self-contained outlet, they are a fire hazard. I do got to give them props on wire slack. They left plenty of wire slack. And they noted their lines, line versus load. But other than that, there's the other line. Other than that, the outlets and light switches in this home are garbage. So we're going to show you how to go through and replace a light switch. And not quite the same as an outlet, but it's close to an outlet. But if you got a mobile home and you haven't went through, and looked at this kind of stuff, you might want to. This is how these self-contained receptacles are connected. They're literally stabbed with a blade, kind of like the push-in wiring on the back of regular receptacles that you should never use. Fire hazard. This is, here, let's set this down here. Definitely, I would say a fire hazard. Those are not very secure at all. Not near enough insulation stripped off, so yeah, that's a problem. So if you have these, I highly suggest changing them out. And I already know what people are going to say. You're a hack, for cutting your drywall like this, because we're going to make the hole bigger for the box. But you know what? You're not going to see the hole after the box is in and the plate's over it. Just don't overcut the hole. Box fits in pretty flush. Put the plate on. It's going to look just fine. So I just use a knife, make my hole bigger. Alright, so we've cut it a little bit. We're about to see if it fits. Got our wires through the box. Those tabs you bend in, before I knew better, I would break them off. But that was years ago. But don't do that. Just bend them in and leave them. They act as clamps to hold the wire in place. Alright, we got the box in. Just your two screws here that hold your wings against the drywall. Now we're ready to strip the wire and start wiring it up. Alright, we got our cable jacket off, but now we need to strip the actual insulation. Make sure you've got a good wire stripper tool. Know the gauge that you're working with. White is typically 14 gauge, so it's 14 gauge wire. We'll find the 14 there. You just stick it in and you'll strip it off. Your outlet and/or switch will have the the recommended strip length. You can hold it up to it. It might be on my outlet here. Yep. You can see right there. That's your recommended strip length. So follow that. Get your wires stripped. All right, we got our wires all stripped. Now we're going to do our wire nuts. So we're going to wire nut all the grounds and all the neutrals together first. I like to put a pigtail on the neutral. I'll show you what that is. And when you get your pack of wire nuts, I already took the paper out. But you got to make sure you use the appropriate sized wire nuts, and it has a paper that comes with it and tells you what the wire nuts designed. I can have 112 and 2 or 3 14s, or 3 14s and 1 or 2 16s. But just look at your paper and make sure you use the right size wire nut. Alright, we got our neutrals wire nutted. Now we're just gonna bend them back in here and get them out of the way. Wire nut's got to be good and tight. Remember that. You don't want any insulation sticking out of the wire nut. Alright. Notice that all the stripped wire is in the wire nut. You don't want any sticking out. And I'll probably wrap that with electrical tape. You don't have to wrap your wire nuts with electrical tape. It just might help insulate it if it's rated for that. You don't have to, but I probably will, so I'll wrap that here in a minute. But now we're going to do the grounds, and we got to put a pigtail on it, and I'll show you how to do that. Note that the neutrals do not get wire nutted on outlets. This is a light switch, so they get wire nutted. But on outlets, they will loop around the screw on the outlet itself, and I'll show you how to do that in another video. But for now, let's work on these grounds. Alright, we got our grounds wire nutted with the pigtail. So the pigtail is extra wire you got to put in, and it comes out to connect to the screw on the switch, right? So that'll go on the green ground screw. And now is where it gets tricky. The hots, so remember how the wires were marked, line and load, the two lines were marked? So the two lines will get wire nutted together with a pigtail, and they will go on a screw, and that's your incoming power, right? And I accidentally bought a pack of three-way switches, but we are not doing three-way switches. We are doing, sorry about that, had an alarm going off. But anyway, I accidentally bought three-way switches instead of single-pole switches, and we are just doing single-pole switches. But the good news is you can use three-way switches for single-pole, not vice versa. But so the black one is called your common. That's where your incoming power goes and outgoing. And the brass ones are your traveler screws. But we're only going to use one of the traveler screws. We'll be using these two on this side, or that traveler screw, and then the common screw. So we'll put our lines on the common screw here, which is black. And then we'll put our other hot that will not get wire nutted. It'll just be by itself. It'll go here in this brass screw, and that is what goes to the light fixtures themselves. So that's the tricky part, and you got to do that part right, or it's not going to operate how it should. So let's do that. Oh, and another thing to note, when you were doing pigtails, so you got to know what size wire you're working with. So we are working with 14 gauge wire. It's white. It's typically 14 gauge. Your pigtails cannot be smaller than the wire you are working with. So we're working with 14 gauge. You cannot do a pigtail with 16 gauge or 18 gauge. You can do the pigtail with the same wire or bigger. So 14 would be fine, but I didn't really have 14 laying around, so this is a 12 gauge pigtail. But it is bigger than the 14 gauge, so that is okay, but that's very important. You cannot size down your wire on a pigtail, but it can be the same or it can be sized up as I did here. Alright, so we got everything hooked up. We got the pigtail for our grounds to the green. Green is always ground. We got our hots took care of. Remember, our lines are on the common screw, and our standalone to the light fixture is on the screw above. And remember, this is a three-way switch that we've converted to a single-pole switch. On a single-pole switch, you will not have a traveler screw. You'll just have brass screws for the hot wires. Everything else is the same on a single pole. But anyway, one thing to note when you are wrapping your wires around the screws, you do it in a clockwise direction. So this way, they'll be wrapped in a hook like this. And this way, say we were to use that screw, they'll be wrapped in a hook like this. Clockwise direction when you're wrapping around your screws. Never use the push ends on the back. Back wiring is okay. That's for another video for another day. Back wiring is a kind of newer technology, but it is not push in wiring, which is a fire hazard. It's the little holes on the back of outlets and switches. It stabs the wire just like the outlet or the switch we ripped out of here. It stabs the wire the exact same way. It's just not good. So never use the push-in wire. And always loop around the screws. Always. Right, now for the hard part. At least I say the hard part. Getting all this pushed in. And these screws right here go in these holes. And it can be a bear a lot of the time, getting everything pushed back in the box. Just be careful. Everything needs to be tight. If everything's tight, nothing should come loose. Pushing it back in the box, because it's got to be tight. Loose wires cause fires. It's important to remember. Everything's got to be tight. So you may have to cram some stuff in there, move stuff around. But as long as everything's good and tight, nothing should come loose. So don't worry about that. Just get it in there. You might need a drill maybe to help you. I don't use a drill most of the time, but it can be very difficult, especially getting started, if it's hard to push everything back in there. It'll help a lot too if a lot of times you can't, but if you can, push in we had a lot of wire slack. If you can push the wires back through those clamps some, that'll help a lot with getting it in there, but sometimes you just can't do it. But if you can do that, it'll make it a lot easier. Alright, we got it in, and as expected it was kind of difficult, but we got it done. And you gotta be careful. It's very easy to strip those screws when you're trying to get all it in there, because there's a lot of pressure. And I almost always strip them some. I mean, you can tell. You see that one? You see that one? Just make sure you can get them. You shouldn't have to work on it again unless 20 years down the road it messes up. You got to unscrew it, but make sure you do your best to not strip the screws so much that you won't be able to get it back out if the switch has to be replaced. But anyway, we got it in. We're going to turn the breaker on, make sure it works like it should. Another thing I will say, I have a good panel and good breakers for a mobile home. I'll give them props on that as well. Their panel was good. Their switches and outlets were not. Let's see, turn that on. See, the light is on. Let's turn it off. Works good. Alright, all thing left to do is put your cover plate on and you're done. And I'm not going to show you how to do that, because if you've got this far, surely you know how to put on and take off cover plate. But thanks for watching. Hope I helped you.